Vanessa Wieliczko, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited for you to be here. I think there's a lot of different topics we can talk about, and you have this really rich career path that you've had in the last 13, 15 years, and I really want to get into that with you, and I want people to learn from that journey that you had and some of the obstacles. I want to talk about you're the CIO of an investment firm, so I want to talk about money management and the way that you guys think about money and some of the advice you give people, and then we'll transition into some really fun personal stuff and talk more about your journey. So let's start with, I guess, your career journey. How did you end up where you are? And before we get there, I think I probably should tell the audience that we actually went to college together and we haven't seen each other in over 13 years. And one of the reasons I reached out to you because that I so distinctly remember even in school of how strong and ambitious and intelligent you were, and to see you sort of manifest who you should become and how you've kind of well-rounded your life both in family and in business, I think is really magical. So I'm really excited to dig into some of these topics with you today.
Well, thanks. Those are all really nice things. And of course, I thought the same about you. It's interesting because looking back on it, I realized just like how type A I was. And even though I still have that in me, I think that as I've matured, I appreciate some things that aren't all about, winning or being the best.
Absolutely. Which is what this podcast is all about. It's about letting people achieve everything they want to achieve, but really doing it in the right way and doing it in harmony. So let's start with your career. Tell us about your work journey and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so I graduated in 2008, which, as we all know, is like a horrible, horrible time to be graduating and trying to get a job in finance. At the time I was studying for the CFA, I had a great professor at Boston University who had given me great advice to say, like, don't waste your time going and getting another minor or something. Just get out there, graduate early, and start studying. So I did that, moved out to San Diego. Also, another story we might loop back to, got married in my first semester of senior year. So moved out to San Diego with my new husband. We now have 3 little kids and have just reached our 14-year anniversary. So it's like crazy how time just flies. But so we moved out to San Diego. I started studying as soon as I had taken level 1 of the Chartered Financial Analyst designation, the CFA. I started looking for jobs. And I think what maybe is a little bit different about my path is I basically found the firm that I wanted to work for. And they weren't hiring, no one really was at the time. And I just said, give me any job. I don't care what it is. Give me any job and I'll prove to you why, I should be in an investment focused role within this firm. They didn't have an investment department. It wasn't typical at the time for a registered investment advisory firm to have a dedicated investment research analyst. Typically the advisors did that like on the side. Mm-hmm. So that's where I started.
And what happened after that?
So I worked in a client relationship manager role, which is kind of in the industry, most people call it a client service associate. So you're basically the admin support for the advisor, doing lots of paperwork, setting up lots of meetings, doing a lot of prep for those meetings. At the time, I don't think I appreciated how valuable that experience would be. I just wanted to get to where I wanted to go, and definitely had some days where I was like, really down about it. So I think that is one of the biggest things that I have learned over time, and that I think has contributed to my success, is not being so short-sighted, like not expecting things to happen in a really short period of time. It's really about like the long game. Mm-hmm. So I did that for 2 years. And then while I was working in that role, I was studying for the CFA. I was also trying to do some analysis at night, as a 21-year-old does, and kind of trying to show the boss that I had skills to actually contribute. So then I moved into an investment research analyst role, and at the time, we were 12 or 13 employees. We had under 400 million in assets under management. And fast forward to today, we are roughly 60 employees, 4 locations, 3 billion in assets under management. So it's like an entirely different firm. And I'm really lucky to have a wonderful team of people that I work with, every day. So I'm now in the chief investment officer position, and I have 3 people on the trading and investment operations side of things, and then 3 people on the portfolio management and research side of things.
Wow, such a cool story. One of the things, and I want to get more into the investment philosophy and some of the things you're seeing right now and some of the trends, et cetera, so that people can really learn from your knowledge. But I think what's really interesting to me, and I want to get into this, is that, not very many people in our generation, let's call it, can stick around and have the patience to work at one firm for 13 years. And I think having this sort of, I kind of take you as somebody who's patiently impatient. Like, you're really ambitious, you want to move really fast, you want the results that you want now, but you have this patience that like, I'm willing to stick it out. People need to give me a shot, or people need to see what I know, etc. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would definitely say it is rare. I was lucky that I was surrounded by lots of, really great mentors, and I asked for advice and feedback frequently. And I think another really compelling factor for me was that my firm was willing to completely cover any education that I wanted. So they paid for and supported me as I pursued the CFA, the Chartered Financial Analyst designation. I next step moved on to the CAIA, which is the Alternative Investment Analyst designation. And then the last one I did was the CFP, which is the Certified Financial Planner. So all of that combined, like, just to have an employer that will pay for it, support you through it, and, help you grow through it, I think is really invaluable. And yeah, I think I believed in the future of the firm enough to see that the day-to-day, even if there were issues and even if there were frustrations, that like the future was worth it. I still have that,
Right.
Still there are days where you're just like, oh, this is frustrating me so much. But if you believe in the future enough and you believe in yourself and your team enough, then you're willing to fight for it.
Yeah. You definitely have to have this opportunistic, positive outlook for the future, right? Because you just can't control what you can't control.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to ask you is, in that process, I think it's really cool and beautiful that your firm was allowed to grow and had space to grow, but it also had this trajectory for you as well, and both flourished, right, at a similar pattern. Are there things that you experienced during that journey that you didn't expect, or obstacles or headwinds, or did you find it that it was like, no, as long as I kept my head down and kept grinding or working, that I just was along for the ride? Do you feel like there were things that you didn't really expect to challenge you, or maybe, talk a little bit about that.
So I have a couple things in that bucket. One is, you hear like these designations I went after. Sounds great. Like, it sounds, highly ambitious, driven person. Maybe like she might be smart. It took me so much effort, so much work. I failed CFA level 2 twice. I failed CFA level 3 once. So it took me 5 years to get the CFA. It took me a year to get the CAIA. It took me 3 months to get the CFP. So it was like a lot of work that went into that, a lot of tears, a lot of frustration, falling asleep on your books, all stuff that I think made me a better person, a better professional. Also, could not have done it with kids. So that would be a point of advice for someone who's coming out of college. Like, go do that stuff before you have kids, because once you have kids, it's just new things that you learn, like patience for one, which I think everything in your life ends up impacting other areas, right? Now that I am a parent, I realize all the ways in which my kids have actually made me such a just a better manager and a better asset to a firm.
Let's go there. Let's go to family, because you are this amazing mom, 3 boys, correct?
Yes, my house is absolutely crazy. I'm outnumbered. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and an almost 2-year-old.
So you're a boy mom and I'm a girl dad, and what I want to know is how you deal with the opposite hormone, because I am struggling with that all the time. I'm outnumbered by women all the time, and sometimes they want nothing to do with me.
Well, how old are your kids?
I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Okay, I don't know. I have no experience with girls, and my kids are like glued to me. So I don't. And sometimes I'm like, can I just peel you off so that I can, like run to the bathroom?
That's right.
But
it's like what you were saying is I feel the same, in that you become a different leader, you become a different manager, you think about the world, the priorities, what your purpose so much differently than when you're sort of on your own, even with a spouse. But when you have kids, everything changes in your perspective of what you find to be important.
Totally. And I will say, like, they've taught me patience. I'm also, I'm going to kindergarten again. I'm learning about every different kind of dinosaur there is. I know more about planets than I ever thought I would. So it's just really fun to like see them learning and like the excitement on their faces when they tackle something new, which is funny because there's even an overlap there between, that and business. Like when you're working with a team and you're supporting someone's professional growth, when you like finally see something click and they get it, it's exciting too.
Yeah, I'll admit that before I had kids, I don't know if I had the level of awareness for empathy than after I had kids. Like the things that parents go through, people go through to, sustain a career or live balanced life, right? This work-life balance concept. I think you don't really get that until, especially if you're a type A high performer trying to go after it, until you really have kids and learn how to create more harmony in that. I definitely struggled with that until I had kids.
Oh God, I still don't have harmony. And then another thing that I think surprised me or challenged me, and I think it's specific to maybe the industry, but maybe not, is that when you're first starting out, you're in a research analyst role. Like your entire job is in the details. That's literally what you're paid to do. You need to like find that needle in the haystack that's either good or bad, right? And then as your role starts evolving and you have different responsibilities, it kind of flips on its head, and you have to like start being higher level and like being able to make decisions really quickly without all the relevant information. And so for me, that was really uncomfortable. Like, well, how can I make a decision? I don't know all the facts, but 80% of them are going to get you there. So making that switch was challenging. And then what surprised me is I think I had put myself in a tiny box of analytical type, like you're a finance person, you're a math person. And for some reason, I even had convinced myself that I liked numbers, I liked spreadsheets, and I didn't really want to be on the people side of things. And the truth was, I didn't necessarily want to I didn't want to lose the investment side of things. My mother actually is a investment advisor, a wealth advisor. So I had experience through her of what that looked like. And I always thought, well, I'm so different than her. She goes into a room, she's a total extrovert. She takes it over and just like she is the event, right? And that's not me. I feel like uncomfortable in those situations. Like I don't think I'm an introvert. I just don't flourish in huge environments with people I don't know. And so somehow I had decided like I'm not that much of a people person. And what I ended up realizing,
you mean you labeled yourself? Is that what you mean?
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as my role started changing, I realized, wait a minute, I love people and I'm super empathetic, and the relationships are actually more important to me than all the other stuff. But I like more intimate relationships. So I think that definitely was a change and something that maybe I hadn't even realized would excite me so much.
I love that. One of the things that, and I can talk about this with you because I went to school with you, but one of the things that I always talk about, and I studied finance and accounting right alongside you, and I ended up being an entrepreneur in a completely different space besides finance and accounting. And I always talked about how finance, or whatever you study for that matter, is just a foundation, and the world really wants to put us in these boxes of, you're a finance person, you need to be in the finance track, you need to be in the numbers, and you need to not be engaged with people, or that's your track, that's it. And we graduated in a time where if you were not innovative or you didn't think outside the box, like, you could not get a finance job. I mean, you kind of went to a firm and just said, hey, look, I'll do anything. I mean, just give me an opportunity and I'll do anything. I ended up in the furniture business. I ended up in the construction and furniture business. So I think I always talk about that, in that, the only person who's going to put you in a box is you. And if you start to think about all the things you could do with the person you are and the skill sets you are, people can do anything. You can really do anything.
It's true. Yeah. And I think, certainly when you first graduated, like, to think that you have to do one thing versus another. I also think, like, sometimes people are too constrained mid-career. And I get that it's like funny coming from me, but who spent at the same firm forever. But I've seen this firsthand through clients that have like completely shifted gears, like they're 40 years old, and granted they've made pretty decent amounts of money, but they're 40 years old and they've made enough money basically to retire. But it's not about retiring, it's about like living the life you want. And so then they kind of take a step back, reassess, and determine, okay, what's my next adventure?
Absolutely. Let's talk about investing in your firm, and talk to us a little bit about your investment philosophy at the company.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say at its core, it's really objective based. So it's not about, necessarily sitting down with a client and like trying to beat a benchmark. Of course, we're going to be benchmarking and seeing, how we're performing against certain things like the S&P 500 in terms of equities. But really, it's more about sitting down with the client and saying, okay, when do you want to retire? If so, like at that point, how much do you need to pull from your portfolio? How much do you have in your portfolio today? How much do we think that we can grow that portfolio until you retire? At that point, how much will the portfolio be growing, and how much will you be pulling from it? How will we be investing now versus in retirement? So those are like the fundamentals of it and the core of it. And then, generally we're going to be telling a client to be, globally diversified. That is kind of it in a nutshell, but obviously we can get into more detail if it's of interest.
Yeah. What are people really asking you for? Are they asking you to just like, look, I have X amount of money, Vanessa or team, I need you to manage it for me and tell me what I'm going to make in 20 years? Are they asking you, like, I guess, what are people coming to you with? Like, what are the questions you guys get asked the most?
So I'll start by saying, like, we don't just manage a client's portfolio. It's more like really being a member of the client's like team, right? Like You're there to help them think through anything that could really impact their well-being. So, for example, advisors are having conversations with clients about life insurance. They're having conversations about estate plans. They're talking with their CPAs and helping with tax planning. So my role is really just like one very small piece of a much, much bigger picture. So an advisor is going to have a much broader discussion. And then when it comes down to the investments, yes, it is like more straightforward where it's like, okay, here's a $5 million portfolio. I am, fairly risk averse and I don't necessarily need to grow it that much. Okay, then I'm going to have a more conservative recommendation. Or I'm fairly young, I'm continuing to contribute to my accounts and I don't need any money from it. I view this as a 20+ year investment. Then we might go obviously much more aggressive.
So yeah, everyone's got their own goals. Everyone's driving their own purpose, right?
Yeah. And then I think what makes us maybe a little bit different is that we probably took more of a heavy allocation in alternatives than a lot of advisory firms. So while we have traditional portfolios that'll play a part in a total portfolio, like we have, mutual fund models, we have individual securities, meaning individual stock and bond portfolios, but then we pair that with alternatives like real estate or private credit or private equity or infrastructure, things that help to diversify and then like serve some need in the portfolio. Maybe it's that you don't believe public equities are going to return the same high return profile that they have historically. Okay, so we add private equity. Maybe it's that you think interest rates are going to go up and that bonds aren't going to inflate your portfolio as much as they did in the past. They're not going to provide the same level of diversification. Okay, we start looking into private credit that has higher income levels and shorter duration, meaning it's not as like long dated. It's not as far out into the future that you'll be getting your capital back.
Prices in almost every major asset class are higher than they've ever been. What are you guys talking about in your boardrooms about the potential risks or catastrophes that could happen? And what can people do to think through those things as you guys are?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, as you might expect. And it's not restricted to right now. I was getting these questions last year. Mm-hmm. And by the way, we're now up like more than 20%. So, I think at the end of the day, in investing, it's super important to be oriented to the long term. Otherwise, it's really hard to invest. Like if you're truly like investing on a quarterly basis or like even a 1 or 2 year basis, it's really hard to market time. Nobody's successful at it. All the research shows that even professionals can't do it well. If you look at analysis of just individuals who tried to do it on their own, they're not successful in doing it. In fact, it can be quite detrimental. Like if you, for example, said, you know what, the market's really high priced right now.
I'm going to wait.
I feel like it's time to get out. Now, let's say you could say, yeah, I'm going to wait. Or you could say, you know what, I think it's time to get out. That decision is actually the easy part. The hard part is, when do you get it back in?
Right.
And so I think, the really short remark is like, don't try to time the market. Yes, prices are high. So you've got high equity valuations in the public markets. You've got relatively low interest rates. So your bonds as well potentially have some downside risk. However, you also have high inflation and an expectation that potentially this might not be transitory. Like this might not just be for the next couple of months. This could be here for another year or more. And with that in mind, like cash is the worst place you could be, right? Because you're losing your purchasing power. So not only are you not participating in the upside of the equity market, you're guaranteeing
a loss.
So I think it's all about trying to take that long-term view, accepting that you're likely to get some corrections in the market where like the market basically like takes a moment to reset and then finds its next launching point to continue up. All the research shows that equity markets do trend up over time. And I think generally the environment is such that we're still recovering from a COVID, pandemic. And I mean, it obviously depends on who you speak to. Like, some people feel like we're totally back to normal. I don't think we are. I mean, a lot of things seem to indicate we're not. I mean, even if you look at like supply chain issues, I don't know if you've started like shopping for your kids for the holidays. I already had 2 orders canceled on me because they can't fill the orders. So I say that because I feel like there's all this pent up demand and people want to get out and like go do things and kind of in some ways like start living life.
Right.
And I think that surge will continue to create like these really volatile movements in the markets where you have like swings in valuation, but it also still has a tailwind to help with earnings.
As a wealth advisor, do people ask you questions? Well, I shouldn't say if people ask you questions. I guess I want to know your perspective about how you see blockchain or crypto or all of this alternative stuff affecting traditional wealth management and investing. And are you seeing that as a disruptor? Are you seeing that as a distraction? How are you incorporating that into the conversation? Just want your perspective.
Yeah, it definitely comes up. We don't really have any expertise in the area, so it's not somewhere that we as a firm have allocated. I think, most people will say like, look, it is highly speculative, right? Like you don't know which crypto is actually going to be out on top. You might be a winner today and a loser tomorrow. And Bitcoin is one of those things that's like a highly contested issue. Like people are either super for it or super against it. It seems like. I would say I'm like definitely more moderate. I think for the service that we are providing to clients, it just doesn't really fit. However, I would give a client like some guidance. Hey, if you want to go buy Bitcoin, you can go on Coinbase, set yourself up with a wallet, and like this is how you buy it. And I can say like personally, my husband actually purchased Bitcoin and a few other cryptos. I think in like 2013, and personally, again, not like professionally, just personally, we just decided, okay, we're going to buy this and just let it sit. Like, and I'm, as you might expect, I have like a really detailed budget and,
life plan.
Statement of net worth and stuff. And for those assets, I have it as a line item on my statement of net worth with the amount that we purchased and a value of 0. So that like, I don't know, 10 years from now, it's just, you're
not even thinking upside about it.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that. I think that people need to think about investing. And I had another financial advisor on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the same thing. And I think people think about investing to try to catch a wave, get out at the top, time the market. I think we do that in a lot of different aspects of the way we spend our money and our relationship with money and our attachment to greed or making money quickly or what have you. And I think history shows time and time again that you just need to focus on the long term, which is, I think, really directly related to what we were talking about earlier, which is, being patient at even a job and like seeing long-term results and seeing long-term returns at a job that you cannot get those returns in 2 to 3 years. You need to spend time at those places and invest in those places to be able to get the return that you're really looking for.
Well, and I think that's more true in investment markets than like anywhere. I mean, even with stocks, that would be our philosophy. Like, we're not going to buy a stock because we think that it's going to have a good quarter. We're going to buy a stock because we think it has a really great upside for the next like 5 years.
Correct.
So I guess 2 different schools of thinking and 2 different ways of investing.
What are your thoughts about the Cathy Woods of the world who are really trying to create more transparency, more openness in the entire investment ecosystem? And is that cat out of the bag? And, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it sounds bad, but I think it is a double-edged sword.
Tell me.
You want more transparency, and you want kind of an equalizer. But a lot of times, I think that there's regulation that happens in the industry that like is well-intentioned but poorly executed. So there have been like, for example, I mean, in alternatives, in order to invest in a lot of alternatives like real estate or private credit or private equity, there are suitability standards. You have to be, for example, an accredited investor. You have to have $1 million net worth. And if you don't have that, then, you know, there might be income requirements. So I think the intent there is, look, these are asset classes that don't have as much transparency. They're not regulated by in some cases, they're not regulated as much. And we're trying to protect the average investor so that either they can afford to hire an advisor and somebody's looking into the details. The catch is like, it also excludes people that maybe really would benefit from those asset classes.
Let's talk about women in leadership. And as you have scaled into your role and climbed the ladder and, you know, achieved a successful career, you are an ambitious woman, you're strong, you're intelligent. What are some of the obstacles that you faced to get where you are? And what advice do you have for other ambitious, driven women who want to follow a similar path?
So I think for me, I never ever felt, well, actually that's not true. I did not feel to the extent an awareness of my gender, right? Until more recently. So earlier in my career, it like wasn't really a big deal. Although of course, you know, I would go to like forecast dinners and I'd be sitting next to someone that was my peer and everyone would assume that I was like that guy's wife, right? That actually happened.
Because finance is a mainly dominated male world. Is that true?
100%. I mean, to give you some statistics, because I'm a nerd like that, in like the CFA charter holder pool of professionals, typically you're talking about like 15 to 20% female, and that's a huge improvement from like 20 years ago. In the CFP or financial planner crowd, that's 30%. So you can see like it does differ within different pockets of the industry. I would assume it's the same within like other fields, you know, like investment banking is probably even lower, especially given the quality of life issues. I think in investment banking, same thing with like auditors. I would assume that it might be even more significant. But for me, one of the ways to like level set and get to kind of a better place was to pursue designations so that I didn't have to go around like proving that I knew what I was talking about. I could just give my business card and say like, okay. Let
the designation or the certificate or let that speak for itself.
And I would say that if, like for anyone, male or female, I think that's a good approach because when you're young, like you look young. I mean, who wants a 25-year-old advisor? Nobody. So no matter how smart you are, like just spend those years learning as much as you can and getting those designations out of the way so that you can focus on other things later on. But again, I didn't feel it quite as much as I think when you get further into your career and then you've continued to like grow and move into higher positions, and then you look around and you're like, oh wow, this is like really different. You know, like it's when maybe you were starting out and it was like maybe a little bit more equal in terms of the statistics, it becomes less so. Or for example, in the CFA community in leadership, you start noticing it more and more and more.
Meaning that there's less women.
Yeah.
So that's why you mean, but it showed up for you more recently.
Yeah. And my way of trying to overcome it has been, first of all, trying to understand why. It's funny. I had a client who wanted to talk to me about that. called me up and said, like, tell me why you think it is. And I was like, oh, I guess I never really thought about that. Maybe I should have some opinions there. And then he continued to like explain it to me, which was interesting. But so I started like reading more, trying to understand it a little bit more. And I also started getting more interested in some of the like work assessments that are out there, like a Caliper or Myers-Briggs or Clifton Strengths. You can start seeing, not necessarily based on gender, although obviously like there tend to be things that are more true than not based on stereotypes. Everybody's different, so like you may not fit that stereotype. But I think it's interesting to understand yourself and why you are the way you are, why you make decisions the way that you do, and same thing with your team. But I can say like one other way I've experienced it through this whole pandemic. We are always on Zoom, right? And our leadership team is actually 50% men, 50% women. So like, I think we're doing pretty well, right? But what I've noticed is, without any like bad intent, the conversation tends to like get taken over by the men in the room. And I think it is because women have been trained more than men to like view interrupting as rude, right? So like, we feel uncomfortable inserting ourselves to like make our point. So my way of coping with that, I use the chat feature all the time. And I'm sure it drives some people crazy, but it's like the thought came to my head, into my mind. I wanted to make the point and I don't want to interrupt you. So like when you're done talking, can we please revisit my point?
Interesting. And that dynamic is different than if we're also face to face, because you can sense the room. Do you see that as a difference?
I actually think this helps, because if you are in person, like, what are you going to do? Like, write it down on a piece of paper and slide it across the table? I think for me anyway, like, I might just not have made my point. I would have been like, look, I just can't get my words in. Or every time I start talking, you interrupt me. So I have tried to learn certain ways to like politely say, let me just finish my point, because I actually think this is important. And then like pausing and talking, but trying to find ways to like continue to share your views as much as anyone else and not appear aggressive or loud, I think is something that women have to deal with that men don't.
I love that. What are you most afraid of?
What am I most afraid of? I don't know, dying.
What else?
I guess it's like kind of morbid, but in the past couple of years have just been like so strange. Like, if anyone told you that this would be the state of affairs in 2020, 2021, you would have been like, you're crazy. That's out of a movie. So sadly, I lost an uncle to COVID right at the beginning of this whole thing in April of last year. So like for me, that's been much more real. My family has been like far more conservative than I think most others have been. And so I just like, I personally can't wait for my kids to be vaccinated. I can't wait to like get out there and travel. I just want to spend time with family. I want like, while the days might have like little issues, I want like my overall sense of my career and the people that I'm with on a daily basis to be positive. And I want that for the people on my team as well. Like, I never want anyone to just feel like week after week dread of coming to work. So for me, I guess it's all about relationships. So you said fear, and then I said all the things I want.
Well, the next question I was going to ask you was, what does it mean for you to be rich? Because you are in the wealth business, you are in the money management business, but I want to know from your perspective, for you, what does it mean to be rich? And you kind of answered some of that. But.
I think it starts with health and relationships. And personally, I have realized that for me, feeling impactful is important. So feeling like I've somehow made a difference, whether it's in like shaping the future of a firm and what it will become for clients and for future employees, that I've left it in a better state. You know, like it's better than it was when I got it. And then, you know, that's part of what excites me about like kids too. Like you're part of this like molding of a human being that's going to go out into the world and like become this great thing, and helping them to like learn how to deal with their emotions and like, you know, be excited to learn and all that. So,
As your kids grow up, and I'm really aware of this question and I think about it all the time. So let me ask you, is that as your kids grow up, what is one or two things that you want them to really remember about how you were a parent, or how you want them to show up?
I hope that I hope that well, this isn't about their feelings about me, but the two things I said, like, I hope that they learn to like be aware of their feelings and communicate more effectively. So like not to be like really angry and just take it out on people, but to like sit back and say like, I'm feeling angry. I don't know why I'm feeling angry, but I wanted you to know. I think a lot of adults are just completely aware of their feelings, and it actually really hinders their relationships. I think it hinders their careers. I read a book earlier this year, which I actually would love to read again, maybe in December, as like getting ready for the new year. It's called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Super interesting, and it dives into like fixed mindset versus growth mindset, which, you know, obviously there are tons of books out there, but I thought this one was really well done. So I would love, in that vein of thinking, to like create kids with a growth mindset that feel like they can do anything, and like doesn't really matter where they are today. It's just like about having that openness to what could be. So I'd love to build that. When I think about my mom, actually, and what I didn't realize was so special was my mom was like divorced. So she was, you know, my dad was around, but he wasn't living with us. So it's like in some ways being like a single parent, you know, like you're on 24 hours a day when you're with your child. So she was alone with me. She was working full time and somehow managed to make every holiday like over the top. So that is one thing I always try to focus on with my kids, and do as best as I can to like make Halloween like
special,
gangbusters, like super special. Same thing with like Thanksgiving and Christmas and any other thing that comes into our family, which is easier said than done because I am the worst cook. Like really the worst cook. We had pumpkin pie for Halloween, and somehow I missed the first step of the recipe. Did not include 20 minutes of the cooking, so it came out like pumpkin soup. Then we tasted it, and I was like, "Oh, it tastes like it doesn't have sugar." And then my husband's like, "Well, did you add the sugar?" I was like, "Oh no, I forgot." So I called my mom. Actually, my mom was like, "Oh, well, it's fine. It's not fully baked. Go chuck the sugar in, stir it up, put it in the oven for 20 minutes, and take it out." We did it. Tasted great. We rebranded it as Ghost Poop, and our kids loved it.
Love it. Ghost Poop. I love it.
So,
well, look, I really appreciate you sharing your story and sharing all this advice. Vanessa, how can people get in touch with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. So it's Vanessa Wieliczko, Wieliczko. I will be spelling my name for the rest of my life. Yeah, really excited to connect with anyone who has advice to share or just wants to chat or would like advice.
Well, listen, thanks so much. And I encourage the listeners to go back. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Maybe we can do this again, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Sounds like fun.
Thanks.